Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out my brand new Stam Warden PvP build. This is updated for the Murkmire DLC. I'm trying out some new sets with this build, and I think what I have here is just super fun to play. It's very strong. We have very high burst potential on the build as well as survivability, and the ultimate generation is through the roof. I'm talking about new Dawnbreakers every 10 to 15 seconds. So we'll check out the stats, some gear alternatives, the CP setup and skills, and more coming up next. Alright, so let's check out the basic stats on the build. Let me hit a couple buffs here. And we're looking at 10k max magicka, 20k health, that'll be about 24k in PvP, 34 max stamina, 700 mag recovery, 1500 health recovery is pretty strong, stamina recovery 1800, that does go up with one of our buffs as well. Weapon damage is 2800, and with our Berserker glyph that will jump up to about 3400. It's a little bit lower than I typically would run my weapon damage, but I do have reasons for that, which I'll explain in a minute. Our physical and spell resistance is coming in at about 20k, that's in heavy armor. About 1500 crit resist as well. I've decided to put all my points into stamina on this build, so 64 points there. And one of the reasons why my weapon damage is a little bit lower on this build specifically is I decided to use the Steed Mundus, and I am not regretting this at all. This is a great Mundus. It actually got buffed in Murkmire DLC, so it now increases your movement speed by 10% passively, and it also has a nice buff to health recovery. So you're getting two buffs for the price of one. I think this is worth it on a lot of stamina builds, so you might see me running this on a few more builds in the future. It does mean that you can't run the warrior anymore, so your weapon damage is going to take a little bit of a hit, but on certain builds like this, like the Stam Warden, the extra movement speed and health recovery is going to be really nice. I think it's worth it in this case. I am using Artaeum Takeaway Broth, and the reason for that is it just plays into our health recovery even more. You can see you get an extra health recovery bonus there, so it is worth it, I think. I'm also a Nord on this build. They have extra health recovery, so that plays into that. For potions, I'm using Tri-Stat potions because we are using all of our resources pretty heavily. Health, stamina, and magicka. Okay, let's jump into the new sets next. This is where it starts to get more interesting. For my first 5-piece set, I decided to use Champion of the Hist. This is a new heavy armor set from the Murkmire DLC. It is heavy armor, but the stats are actually pretty stamina DPS friendly, which is interesting. It's actually pretty good for a stamina setup. You can see you have weapon damage, stamina, which is very good. And then for the 5-piece bonus, we have a passive minor heroism. So anytime we're in combat, we have that minor heroism buff up, generating extra ultimate. When I talked about in the intro being able to throw down Dawnbreakers every 10 to 15 seconds, this is part of how that works, just having that passive ultimate generation. In addition to some of the passive ultimate generation and skills that the Warden has, you can pump out ultimates really fast. So I do like this new set a lot, particularly on the Stam Warden. You'll get those Dawnbreakers out very quick. And the fact that it's heavy armor is very good too. We get the extra healing received, and all the passives that heavy armor gets access to. So for this, I am running the heavy armor chest piece, legs as well, boots, and then the other 2-piece comes from the weapons. So I'm running 2 daggers, and that's just for the extra crit boost that we get from running daggers. This is a 5 heavy armor, 2 medium build, so the crit is pretty low at base. So having that extra crit bonus from the daggers I think is helpful. Main hand I'm using Nirnhond with a stamina restore. Offhand I'm using infused with that Berserker enchant. So I like the stamina restore on this build. If you're doing something else like a red guard, you might not need that glyph, but I find that as a Nord in heavy armor this actually helps a lot, having that extra stamina sustain on this glyph. But again, you can choose other glyphs here. I definitely would recommend infused on the offhand though. You'll get a very high uptime on that, and it just helps push your weapon damage even higher. And then for the back bar weapon, I went with the greatsword. Powered, the glyph doesn't really matter a whole lot here. What does matter is the trait. So I think powered is probably best in slot for this. You get that extra % healing done. Another good option though would probably be defending. All right, moving on to our next 5-piece set. Decided to use Battlefield Acrobat here for the next set. This is another Murkmire DLC set. It is from Rewards of the Worthy, so you can get that either in the rewards containers or you can buy it from guild traders. Stats here are pretty decent. You've got stamina recovery, max stamina, which is all good. And then the 5-piece is nice. It reduces the cost of all your abilities by 6%. So the fact that I wanted to run heavy armor with this Stam Warden setup, I really like the idea of having reduced cost across the board. Not just on my stamina abilities, but this also affects magicka abilities, which if you know the Warden, there's quite a few magicka buffs that you can run on the class. So this can reduce the cost of those as well. And not only that, it actually reduces the cost of our ultimates. So playing into that idea of increased ultimate generation, you now have a lower cost as well, so you get those ultimates out even faster. So I do like this setup for my other 5-piece set. I'm using 2 pieces on the body, so medium gloves, medium waist, and then 3 jewelry. I just have blue right now. Obviously you could get better quality. I'm using all robust and 1 stamina recovery, 2 weapon damage. Now if you want to min-max this even more, I didn't have the gems to do this, but there's enough stamina on this build, I think, where you could do probably some infused weapon damage glyphs here on your jewelry if you have the gems to do that and push out even more weapon damage. You could definitely do that. You could also decide to run full weapon damage if you think your recovery is okay. Remember, we are in heavy armor, so it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but you could definitely pull it off if you're a more experienced player. But I do like the stats on this set and the 5-piece. It plays really nice with the Stamina Warden. Other things you could run in this jewelry and gloves and waist slot, you could do something like Bone Pirate, for example, if you wanted just more stats overall, if you wanted more recovery, more weapon damage from your glyphs, you could definitely use Bone Pirate. Another good option for pure damage would be Spriggans. But I do like just the extra sustain that Acrobat offers the build, so I'm going to use that for now. And it's a new set, so why not? And last but not least, the monster set. You have a couple options here. I decided to use Troll King just to help with my survivability. So Troll King plays really nice into how I set this up because I have a lot of health recovery bonuses already. Number 1, I'm a Nord, so I get passive health recovery for that race. Number 2, I'm using Artaeum Takeaway Broth. That gets an extra 350 or so health recovery. Number 3, using the Steed Mundus, so more health recovery there. Number 4, we're using Tripods, so we have health recovery there. And you have this, so we're talking very easy healing and survivability on this build. Basically 4k or more health recovery once Troll King procs. It's really good for staying alive. I'm running this in heavy, both heavy head and heavy shoulders. That's going to give you the best damage mitigation as far as maxing out your resists. If you are running in an organized group with a healer, you might not need this. You could do more of a sustain or a damaging set. So in that case, you might want to choose Bloodspawn as your monster helm. You could also choose Velodreth for more burst damage overall. For my glyphs, I'm using a few tri-enchants here and then mostly stamina on the other pieces. Traits, I would recommend at least 4 to 5 Impen and 2 to 3 well-fitted. Alright, let's jump into the skills next. Starting with our front bar Dual Wield, we've got Rending Slashes for the first ability. This is just a lot of single target pressure, so it does a lot of nice damage over time, does a snare as well, and it has a low cost, which on a heavy armor build, I'm always looking for skills that have a low cost. So 1700 stamina is very easy to maintain on this build, and it's just your single target pressure. One thing I do like to combine this with always is just lead off with a heavy attack beforehand. That way you'll get a lot of burst damage potential on your single target. Next up, Steel Tornado. This is basically an AoE execute in the way that we're using it. So you can see here it deals up to 100% more damage to enemies based on the percentage of their missing health. in addition to that, in your Dual Wield passives, you have this passive Slaughter, which increases damage by 20% against enemies under 25% health. So you basically have a double execute from Steel Tornado, which is why it's so strong right now in this game, especially in no CP battlegrounds, which is what I tend to play the most. Make sure though that you're using it as an execute and nothing else. It's not worth using on an enemy who's at 40% health or more. The damage that you do at that threshold is not going to be worth it, and it does have a high cost. So save this when you have a few enemies in front of you who are sitting at that nice 20-25% range, and just spin to win and you're good to go. Next up, Quick Cloak. Now I'm using this ability for a lot of reasons. It's actually a very good skill that I didn't think about using at first, but when I started playing around with it, I really liked it on this specific build. So obviously it does a little bit of extra damage every 3 seconds, but then playing into our survivability, we also get major evasion, which is that 25% AoE damage reduction. This is very strong on the build, combined with heavy armor. So we have our heavy armor mitigation plus the extra 25%. It's going to make us very tanky overall. In addition to that, it's just another source of major expedition. On the Stamina Warden, I like having that little bit of extra speed to close the distance. I don't have a gap closer, so what I can do is just put that on for 4 seconds and I have the speed. Really good for closing the gap between targets, and again you get the extra damage mitigation. Next up, we've got the bread and butter Subterranean Assault on the Stamina Warden. This actually got a buff surprisingly in this patch. I didn't think it needed it, but why not? So 1900 stamina on a heavy armor build. Basically the cost got reduced, but the damage and the AoE burst is still the same. From this skill you also get Major Fracture, so you get that nice physical resistance debuff for 5 seconds. And this does have a 3-second delay. So you want to make sure that you're pumping out these sub-assaults constantly every 3 seconds. And in between you can do things like a heavy attack, rending slash, and then that'll fire off at the same time. If you're fighting a single target, you can get nice pressure that way. You can also combine that once it goes off with your Steel Tornado if they're low enough to execute. So next up we've got Bird of Prey, which also got buffed in Murkmire. You do get 4 seconds of Major Expedition. So what's nice about that is you have different ways of getting movement speed, so you're not pulling all your resources. If I have to travel from one side of the map to the other, I can do Quick Cloak for 4 seconds, and then Bird of Prey for 4 seconds. Quick Cloak, Bird of Prey. And so I can keep my pools pretty topped off without losing too much stamina or magicka either way. So that is good, but the real reason that you're going to use this is the passive Minor Berserk. This is passive now. It used to be that you had to actually cast the ability to get that buff, but you can see on my little fancy console buff tracker that I have the buff passively even without the skill being casted. So that's what's really nice. You'll want it on your front bar. Both of these abilities, by the way, benefit from Animal Companions, which got buffed as well. Let's see. So Advanced Species got increased to 3% damage done. This is another reason why you don't need to put everything into weapon damage on a Stamina Warden. You get extra weapon damage from Berserker, Bird of Prey 8%, and then every Animal Companion ability is going to give you an extra 3%. So overall in this build, I have about 14% damage increase just passively. Then our ultimate, of course, Dawnbreaker of Smiting. Can't really go with anything else. Notice that I do have a reduced cost. Again, that's from my Battlefield Acrobat. And with our extra ultimate generation, you'll get lots of these out. It just does tons of burst damage, and you get that nice stun at the end. So that's definitely what you want to run on your front bar. So let's swap to the back bar now. This is our two-handed powered greatsword. First off, I've got forward momentum. Everything on this bar is basically either a buff or it's for survivability. So forward momentum is your snare and root removal. This is what the skill is for. You get a little bit of extra healing over time, which can be helpful. It can help you proc your Troll King, for example, but we're really just using this for the snare removal and to get out of roots when we're on our back bar. You can pop that, do something like go around the corner, get some line of sight, and then heal up, let your Troll King do its thing. Definitely a very good skill still on a heavy armor build. Next up, Shimmering Shield. This is another thing that makes the Warden extra tanky. We are using heavy armor. We're using Quick Cloak on the front bar to kind of help with that AoE mitigation. But if you're dealing with any type of ranged target, whether it's a Stamina Nightblade spamming Snipe, or Sorcerer spamming Crystal Frag, this is really going to help you survive. It does a ton of damage absorption. You can see about 30k for up to 3 projectiles. And the major reason we use it is you get that major heroism buff for 6 seconds. So even more ultimate generation on the build from this buff. I definitely always run this on the back bar for a Stamina Warden. Resolving Vigor is just our heal over time. You'll always want to keep this up as soon as you take damage. Just pop one of those. And then our last two are just our buffs. Bullnetch. Bullnetch could seem redundant, but there's actually a very good reason to have this. A couple of reasons, actually. So it does give us our weapon damage, which is redundant with forward momentum. But one of the reasons that we need this is the stamina recovery. You can see it restores over 5k stamina. I believe this got buffed as well in Murkmire over about 27 seconds. So this is super, super helpful to have on a heavy armor build where your recovery is going to be a little bit low already. You definitely need this skill. Another reason why you want to have this that some people forget is we do have a passive Flourish, which increases magicka and stamina recovery by 12%, but only if we have one of those animal companion abilities slotted. So if you didn't have this, you wouldn't get that extra 12% recovery on the back bar, which is a big loss, especially in battlegrounds. So that's another great reason to have this skill on your back bar. And then last but not least, we've got Ice Fortress. This is our major ward, major resolve, and minor protection, which is really good, just to help us be a little bit more tanky. For the back bar ultimate, I like using the trees for the extra heal. It's just kind of an emergency heal. Normally I go with the other morph, which gives you a bit of an extended heal, but I actually like this since the focus of this build is basically ultimate gen. You get an extra 20 ultimate if the heal is used on a target that's under 50%, which is pretty much going to be every single time you use it. So that just gets your ultimate back up quicker so you can get another heal off or get closer to that Dawnbreaker of smiting. Alright, so then just a quick look at champion points. Starting in the green tree, I put 40 into Warlord, 35 into Sprinter, 43 Tenacity, 19 into Arcanist, 64 Mooncalf, 32 in Healthy for the extra health recovery, why not? Shadow Ward 13, 23 into Tumbling, 32 into Blessed, 31 Physical Weapon Expert, 72 Master at Arms, 7 into Shattering Blows, 20 into Thaumaturge. This does help with things like our Rending Slashes and Dawnbreaker of Smiting, so a little bit here is helpful. 34 Precise Strikes, 18 into Piercing, 56 Mighty, 66 Ironclad, 15 Resistant, 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 34 into Thick Skinned, and 27 into Quick Recovery. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this build video on the Stamina Warden PvP build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like or a comment below. And as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are not already. I create new builds and guides every week on this channel, and I definitely appreciate your support. So until then, I will see you around in the next video. Peace.